What really happened after my daughter-in-law told my own son to suspend me in front of the entire staff meeting? How did a quiet signature on a resignation letter turn into a chain reaction that left her speechless the next morning, staring at my empty desk, my departing clients, and the lawyer waiting with documents she never imagined existed? This is the story of how a calm man, long underestimated by his own family, finally stopped playing along. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The fluorescent lights always flickered in the northeast corner of the office floor. I'd complained about it 3 times over the past 2 months, but the facilities manager kept putting it off. Now I didn't bother looking up anymore when the buzz-click-buzz started around 9:30 each morning. Just another thing that didn't matter enough to fix. I set my coffee down on the desk and powered up the computer. The screen glowed blue, then white, then finally settled into the login prompt. 27 years I'd been doing this. Same building, different desks, 3 different company names as mergers came and went. But the work stayed the same: client management, account oversight, making sure the promises we made actually got kept. Morning, Marlowe. That was Jensen from accounting. He didn't slow down as he passed my cubicle, just tossed the greeting over his shoulder like spare change. Morning, I said, but he was already gone. The office filled up slowly. Voices drifted over the partition walls. Someone laughed near the break room. Keyboards started their rhythmic clicking. I pulled up my schedule for the day and saw the staff meeting at 10, conference room B. Mandatory attendance, the email had said. That usually meant something tedious about new procedures or updated compliance training. I was reviewing the Hale account notes when I heard her voice. Though those reports were supposed to be formatted differently. Maris stood at the entrance to my cubicle, arms crossed, one hip cocked to the side. She wore a navy blazer that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Her expression was the one she always used when she wanted an audience. I sent the template last week. I glanced at my screen. The client prefers this format. I've been using it for 6 years. Well, the client isn't managing internal documentation standards. I am. She tapped one finger against her forearm. Please redo them by noon. 3 junior staffers had slowed their walking pace near the printer. They were pretending to check their phones, but I could see them watching. I'll take a look, I said. Oh, you'll redo them, Maris corrected. This isn't optional. I nodded once. She waited like she expected an argument, but I just turned back to my screen. After a moment, she walked away, heels clicking sharp against the tile. That was how most mornings went now. Small corrections, little adjustments, reminders that things were changing and I needed to keep up. Maris had been with the company for 8 months. She'd been my daughter-in-law for 3 years. The job came after the marriage, which I'd thought was strange at the time, but Orion had insisted it made sense. She had a background in process improvement, he'd said. The company needed fresh perspective. What the company got was someone who treated every interaction like a chess move. I reformatted the reports. It took 40 minutes I didn't have, but I sent them off at 11:45 and headed to the conference room. Conference room B was the smaller one, with 8 chairs around a rectangular table and a wall-mounted screen that only worked half the time. When I walked in, most of the seats were already filled. Orion sat near the head of the table, flipping through a tablet. He glanced up when I entered, and something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt, more like discomfort. Dad, he said. Just the one word. Then he looked back down. I took a seat near the middle. Maris entered a minute later, carrying a leather portfolio and a bottle of sparkling water. She sat down next to Orion, leaning close to whisper something that made him nod. Ellen Ward from HR came in last and closed the door. She was 55, graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she'd always been fair with me. We'd worked together on a benefits committee years ago. She didn't sit, just stood near the wall with her arms folded. Let's get started, Orion said. His voice had that forced confidence he used when Maris was around. We're here to discuss some performance concerns and operational adjustments. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. As you all know, Maris said, taking over without waiting for Orion to continue, we've been implementing new accountability structures. Some team members have been resistant to these changes. She looked directly at me. Marlowe, specifically, has demonstrated a pattern of disrespect toward new protocols. He's ignored formatting standards, missed deadlines on updated reporting, and openly questioned directives in front of junior staff. I opened my mouth, but she kept going. This isn't about personal feelings. It's about maintaining a professional environment where everyone follows the same rules. She glanced at Orion. which is why we're recommending a formal suspension. 2 weeks, unpaid, to reassess his commitment to the team. The room went completely silent. I looked at my son. He was staring at the table, jaw tight. Someone coughed. Ellen shifted her weight but said nothing. "Orion?" I said quietly. He finally looked up. His eyes were tired. "I think it's the right call, Dad. You've been difficult lately." "Difficult?" I repeated. "Resistant," Maris clarified. "Change is hard for everyone, but we can't make exceptions." I sat there for a long moment. 27 years. 3 company names. Clients who trusted me more than they trusted the brand. And now my own son was agreeing to suspend me because his wife wanted to prove a point. I nodded once. "Understood." Maris blinked. She'd been ready for an argument. So had Orion. The rest of the room seemed frozen, waiting for me to push back, to defend myself, to do anything except accept it. "That's it?" Maris asked. "That's it," I said. Ellen Ward moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at me. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Marlowe, if you'd like to speak with me privately afterward, I'll be in my office." The meeting ended. People filed out slowly, avoiding eye contact. Orion left first, Maris right behind him. I stayed in my chair until the room was empty, except for Ellen. "I'm ready," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Ready for what?" "To sign." Ellen studied me for a moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Whenever you're ready." I stood up and followed her out. The HR office smelled like fresh paper and burnt coffee. Ellen gestured to the chair across from her desk and closed the door behind us. She didn't sit right away, just stood there, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "They're serious about this," she said finally. "I know." Maris has been building a case for weeks, documented incidents, timestamps. She's methodical. Ellen sat down and folded her hands on the desk. "A suspension is just the start. She's positioning for more." "What would you recommend?" I asked. She hesitated. Ellen had worked in HR for nearly 2 decades. She knew how to stay neutral, how to protect the company without picking sides. But right now, something in her voice suggested she was giving me more than standard advice. "I'd recommend you think very carefully about what you want out of this situation," she said, "because once you go down one path, it's hard to reverse." I met her eyes. "I don't want to reverse anything." She studied me, then pulled open a drawer and took out a single sheet of paper. Standard resignation form. She set it on the desk between us, but didn't push it forward. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Completely." Ellen slid the paper across. I read it through once, even though I already knew what it said. Voluntary resignation, effective immediately. Final paycheck and accrued benefits to be processed within 2 weeks. I picked up the pen she offered and signed my name at the bottom. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. She took the form back and placed it in a folder. "I'll process this today. Your access will be deactivated by tonight." "Thank you, Ellen." "Marlowe." She paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're handling this better than most people would." I stood up. "I've had practice." The walk back to my cubicle felt longer than usual. The office noise seemed distant, like I was hearing it through water. I passed the break room where 2 people were microwaving lunch. They glanced at me and quickly looked away. Word was already spreading. I sat down at my desk and stared at the computer screen. My email inbox had 37 unread messages. 3 were from clients. 1 was from Orion, sent 20 minutes ago. The subject line just said, "Sorry." I didn't open it. Instead, I thought about how I'd gotten here. Not just this morning, not just this year, but the whole shape of it, stretched across decades. I'd started at this company when Orion was 6. Long hours back then. Missed soccer games. Forgotten school projects. His mother had been patient about it, right up until she wasn't. The divorce came when he was 12. She'd remarried within 2 years and moved to Portland. Orion stayed with me. I'd thought that meant something, that he'd understood I was working for us, for his future. I got him an internship here the summer after college. He was bright, capable, but not confident. Needed reassurance. I introduced him to the right people, vouched for him when positions opened up. He moved from intern to junior operations to mid-level management in 6 years. Not fast, but steady, earned. Then he met Maris at some industry mixer. She was polished, articulate, had opinions about everything. She talked about process optimization and structural efficiency like they were holy scripture. Orion ate it up. Suddenly he was staying late, reading management books, using phrases like synergy and vertical integration. I'd been proud of him. The wedding was small. Maris's family flew in from somewhere expensive. Her father wore cufflinks that probably cost more than my car. Her mother asked what I did at the company, and when I told her, she'd smiled and said, "Oh, how quaint." Orion had laughed it off, said she didn't mean anything by it. 6 months later, Maris joined the company. Orion said it was her idea, that she wanted to contribute. I'd thought it was fine. Plenty of couples work together. But Maris didn't just work. She studied, she watched, she asked questions that sounded innocent, but weren't. How long do clients usually stay with one account manager? What happens if someone retires? Do the accounts automatically transfer? Who decides if procedures need updating? The humiliation started small. An email I wasn't copied on, a meeting I wasn't invited to. Then bigger. Maris assigning me tasks meant for junior staff. Orion staying silent when she corrected me in front of others. And now this. Public suspension. My own son agreeing I needed discipline. I pulled a cardboard box from under my desk. It had held reams of printer paper once. Now I started filling it with personal items. A coffee mug my ex-wife had given me before things fell apart. A photo of Orion at his college graduation. A rubber band ball I'd been building for 10 years. My phone buzzed. A text from Victor Hale. Still on for this afternoon? Need to discuss the quarterly review. Victor. 61 years old, started his logistics company from nothing, built it into a regional powerhouse. He'd been my client for 15 years. We'd weathered contract disputes, market crashes, personnel changes. He trusted me because I'd never lied to him. Never overpromised, never played games. I texted back, "Yes. Same place? Cafe on 5th, 2:30. I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. I had time. I finished packing the box. It wasn't much. 27 years condensed into a container that weighed maybe 10 pounds. I closed the flaps and carried it to my car in the parking lot. The sun was bright. The asphalt shimmered with heat. I set the box in the trunk and stood there for a moment, breathing. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, from something else. Clarity, maybe. Or relief. I got in the car and drove home. My house was quiet. It always was. I'd bought it after the divorce, a small 2-bedroom ranch on the east side of town. Orion had lived here through high school, but his room was mostly storage now. Boxes of old textbooks. A broken lamp I kept meaning to fix. I set the cardboard box on the kitchen table and made myself a sandwich, turkey and Swiss. I ate standing up, looking out the window at the backyard. The grass needed mowing, the fence needed paint. Normal problems, manageable problems. I finished eating and went to the spare bedroom I'd converted into a home office. There was a desk, a filing cabinet, and a laptop that was 3 years old but still worked fine. I powered it up and opened my personal email. Most of it was junk, promotional offers, newsletters I'd never read, but there were also folders I'd created over the years. Client correspondence, contract copies, meeting notes. I was careful about documentation, always had been. I opened the folder labeled Hale Industries, 17 subfolders, organized by year. I clicked on the most recent one and scrolled through. Emails about delivery schedules, budget approvals, strategic planning sessions. And there, buried in a thread from 6 months ago, was the clause I'd been thinking about. It was in the service agreement we'd renewed last spring, standard language mostly, but there was a section about account transitions. It specified that any change in primary representation required written consent from the client, not just notification. Consent. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misremembering. Then I opened the folder for Brennan Logistics. Different client, same clause. And again in the folder for Quinlan Supply. All 3 of my major accounts had the same language. I'd negotiated for it years ago when the company went through a merger and clients were getting shuffled around without warning. I'd argued it was about relationship stability. Management had agreed because it sounded reasonable and didn't cost them anything, until now. I leaned back in my chair. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I needed to be careful. Maris wasn't stupid. She'd check the contracts eventually, but she'd assume they were standard templates, that account transitions were just procedural. She wouldn't think to look for consent requirements until it was too late. My phone buzzed. Another text, this time from Orion. "Can we talk? Tonight?" I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to reply, wanted to ask him what he was thinking, how he could let this happen. But another part of me, the part that had signed the resignation form without hesitation, knew it didn't matter anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up a blank document and started drafting an email. Not to send yet, just to organize my thoughts. The subject line was simple. Account transition notification. I wrote 3 versions, each one more precise than the last. Then I saved them all in a folder labeled Drafts, Confidential, and shut the laptop. It was almost 2. I changed into a clean shirt and headed back out. The cafe on 5th was a small place with outdoor seating and decent coffee. Victor was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a newspaper folded next to his elbow. He looked up when I approached and waved me over. "Marlowe." He stood and shook my hand. His grip was firm. "You look tired." "Long morning," I said. We sat down. A waitress came by and I ordered coffee. Victor waited until she left before speaking. "I heard something strange," he said. "Got a call from your office this morning. Someone named Maris. She wanted to introduce herself as my new point of contact." I kept my expression neutral. "Is that right?" I told her I wasn't interested in changing contacts. Victor leaned forward. She seemed surprised, said it was just a procedural update. I told her procedures don't override contracts. What did she say to that? She said she'd look into it and get back to me. Victor picked up his coffee. Should I be concerned? "About your account? No? About the company?" I paused. "Maybe." He studied me. "You're leaving?" It wasn't a question. "I already left," I said. "Signed the paperwork this morning." Victor set his cup down slowly. "After 15 years. After 27. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet." "Independent? Possibly." Victor nodded. He didn't ask why I was leaving or what had happened. He didn't need to. He'd been in business long enough to recognize when someone was being pushed out. "If you go independent," he said, "I'm coming with you." I looked at him carefully. "That's a significant decision." "It's an easy decision. I work with people I trust. You've never given me a reason not to trust you." He tapped the table with one finger. "Maris gave me 3 reasons in a 5-minute phone call." "She's aggressive," I said. "She's careless," Victor corrected. "There's a difference. Aggressive I can work with. Careless costs me money." The waitress brought my coffee. I thanked her and took a sip. It was too hot, but I barely noticed. "I'll need a few days to set things up properly," I said. "Take the time you need. My current contracts don't expire until the end of next quarter. But when you're ready, I'm ready." We talked for another 20 minutes about logistics and timing. Nothing definite, just possibilities. But by the time I left the cafe, I had a clearer picture of what came next. I drove back to the office to return my access badge. I could have mailed it, but I wanted to see the building one more time. Wanted to see if anyone would notice I was different now. The parking lot was half empty. Most people took late lunches on Fridays. I walked in through the side entrance and headed toward the security desk. The guard on duty was someone I didn't recognize. Young kid, maybe 25, scrolling through his phone. "Returning this," I said, sliding the badge across the counter. He glanced at it, then at me. "You quitting?" "Already did." "Huh." He took the badge and tossed it in a bin. "Have a good one." I turned to leave and almost ran into Maris. She was coming from the elevators, carrying a tablet and talking on her phone. She ended the call when she saw me. "Marlowe." Her voice was cool. "I wasn't expecting to see you back here. Just dropping off my badge." She glanced toward the security desk, then back at me. "I want you to know this wasn't personal." "Of course not." "It was about maintaining standards." "You understand?" I nodded. "Completely." She seemed to be waiting for more. An argument, resentment, something. When I didn't give it to her, she shifted the tablet to her other hand. "Well," she said, "I hope you find something that suits you." "I will." She walked past me toward the elevators. I watched her go, watched the doors close behind her, then I left the building and didn't look back. I spent the rest of the afternoon at home, going through old files. I found copies of 3 more contracts with the same consent clause, 6 major clients in total. That was more than half the company's revenue. If even 3 of them followed Victor's lead, the impact would be substantial. My phone buzzed again. Orion, calling this time instead of texting. I let it go to voicemail. He called twice more before giving up. Around 6, I made dinner. Pasta with marinara sauce from a jar. I ate in front of the television, watching the news without really absorbing it. Afterward, I went back to the home office and opened the laptop again. I pulled up the draft emails and read through them one more time. Then I opened a new document and started compiling a list. Client names, contract dates, key contact information. I worked until midnight, organizing everything into a clear, logical structure. When I finally went to bed, I slept better than I had in months. Saturday morning, I woke up early. The house was cold. I turned up the thermostat and made coffee, standing in the kitchen while it brewed, watching the light change through the window. I had 3 client meetings scheduled over the next few days. Not official meetings, just check-ins, casual conversations, the kind of thing that happened naturally when you'd worked with someone for years. Brennan Logistics was first. I'd called ahead and asked if I could stop by to discuss some transition details. Their CFO, a woman named Patricia, who I'd worked with since she was assistant controller, had agreed immediately. Their office was in an industrial park on the south side, low brick buildings with small windows and parking lots full of trucks. I pulled in around 9 and found Patricia waiting in the lobby. "Marlowe." She smiled and shook my hand. "I heard you're moving on." "Word travels fast." It does when the person calling to inform us sounds like she's reading from a script. Patricia led me down a hallway to her office. It was small but organized, files stacked neatly, a calendar on the wall marked up with color-coded notes. Maris Traskier. She introduced herself as our new account manager. "What did you think?" I asked. Patricia closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Honestly, I thought it was strange that you didn't call me yourself. We've been working together for 11 years? 12. Exactly. So when some stranger calls and says she's taking over, my first reaction is to wonder what happened to you." I explained the situation. Not all of it, just the essential parts. I'd resigned. I was considering going independent. I wanted to make sure the transition was handled properly. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Do you remember when we had that billing dispute 3 years ago?" she asked. "The shipping error." "Right. Our vendor blamed your company. Your company blamed the vendor. Everyone was pointing fingers. And you showed up here with all the documentation, walked me through every step, and figured out the actual problem was a software glitch no one had noticed." She tapped her desk. "That saved us $40,000 and a potential lawsuit. I was just doing my job." "You were doing more than your job. You were protecting our interests even when it would have been easier to let us fight it out with the vendor." Patricia opened a drawer and pulled out a business card. "I don't know what your plans are, Marlowe, but if you need a reference or a client, you have one here." I took the card. It was blank except for her name and number. "I'll keep that in mind." "I'm serious. Maris can handle the transition paperwork, but if you're setting up independently, I want to work with you, not the company, you." We talked for another half hour about logistics and timing. She walked me out, and as I was leaving, she said, "One more thing. There's a clause in our contract about primary representation. Did you write that?" "I did." "Smart. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it makes sense now. Any change requires our written consent, right?" "That's correct." She smiled. "Good to know." I drove home feeling lighter. 1 down, 5 to go. The next meeting was Monday morning. Quinlan Supply. Their operations manager was a man named George who'd been in the business for 30 years and didn't trust anyone under 40. He'd only agreed to work with my company because I'd spent 2 months convincing him we weren't going to treat him like a number on a spreadsheet. I met him at his warehouse. It was loud, forklifts moving, people shouting instructions, the smell of diesel and cardboard. George was in the back office, a small room with glass walls overlooking the floor. He saw me coming and opened the door. "Marlowe." He didn't shake hands, just nodded. "Heard you quit?" "That's right." "Why?" "Time for a change." George grunted. He was 62, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked like they'd spent decades lifting boxes. "Your replacement called me. Talked a lot. Didn't say much." "Maris." "Yeah, wanted to set up a meeting. I told her I'd think about it." He sat down behind his desk. It was covered with invoices and shipping manifests. "You going independent?" "Planning on it." "Good. You let me know when you're set up. I'll transfer over." "Just like that?" "Just like that. I don't have time for people who don't understand this business." "You understand it. She doesn't." He picked up a pen and wrote something on a sticky note. "Here's my personal cell. Call me when you're ready." The third meeting was with a smaller client, a regional distributor I'd worked with for 8 years. Same story. Polite interest in hearing about Maris. Immediate preference to follow me. By Tuesday afternoon, I had verbal commitments from 4 clients. Written confirmations would come later, once I had official business registration paperwork, but the intent was clear. I spent Tuesday evening setting up a meeting with a lawyer, not just any lawyer, Rowan Briggs. I'd worked with him years ago on a contract dispute and had been impressed by his precision. He didn't waste time, didn't overcharge, just gave clear, actionable advice. His office was in a modern building downtown, glass and steel, the kind of place that charged by the square foot, but Briggs's office itself was modest. Bookshelves, a desk, 2 chairs. He greeted me at the door and motioned for me to sit. "Marlowe Trasker," he smiled. "It's been a while. What brings you in?" I explained the situation, the resignation, the clients, the consent clauses in the contracts. I showed him copies of the agreements and the verbal commitments I'd received. Briggs read through everything carefully. Then he leaned back and steepled his fingers. "This is solid," he said. "The consent requirement is explicit. Your former employer can't transfer these accounts without client approval. If they try to force it, the clients can terminate their contracts without penalty." "What about Maris? She's already been contacting them." "She can contact them all she wants, but unless they sign a formal consent form, she has no authority to act as their representative." He tapped one of the contracts. "This clause is binding, and from what you've told me, none of your clients are interested in signing." "So, what's the next step?" "You register your business, limited liability company probably, I can help with that. Then you send formal notifications to your former employer and to each client, stating that you're now operating independently and requesting written confirmation of their preferred representation." "How long will that take?" "Registration? A few days. Notifications? I can draft them by tomorrow." Briggs paused. "But there's one more thing you should consider." "What's that?" "Your former employer is going to realize what's happening eventually. When they do, they're going to try to stop it. They might claim you violated a non-compete agreement or breached confidentiality. Do you have any contractual restrictions?" I shook my head. "No non-compete. I checked when I signed my resignation." "Good. Then they'll probably try to make it a public issue, damage your reputation, pressure the clients." He met my eyes. "You need to be ready for that." "I am." "Are you? Because this is going to get uncomfortable. These are your son and daughter-in-law. They're not going to take this quietly." I thought about Orion's text messages, the voicemails I hadn't listened to, the look on his face in the conference room when he'd agreed to suspend me. "I'm ready," I said. Briggs nodded. "All right, let's get started." I left his office with a folder full of documents: registration forms, draft notification letters, a timeline for the next 2 weeks. It felt real now, not just an idea, a plan. That night, I finally listened to Orion's voicemails. There were 5. The first 4 were variations of the same message. He wanted to talk. He was sorry things had gotten heated. He hoped we could work it out. The 5th one was different. "Dad, Maris is really upset. She says you're trying to sabotage her, that you're contacting her clients behind her back. I told her you wouldn't do that, but I don't know. Can you just call me, please?" Her clients. I deleted all 5 messages and went to bed. The business registration went through on Thursday. Trasker Consulting, LLC. Simple name, clear purpose. Briggs filed the paperwork and handed me a folder with the official documents. I was now the sole owner and operator of an independent consulting firm. "Congratulations," he said. "You're officially in business. Now what?" "Now we notify everyone." He pulled out a stack of letters he'd prepared. Each one was addressed to a different client, explaining that I was operating independently and requesting written confirmation of their preferred account management arrangement. "These go out today via certified mail. Your former employer will receive copies." "What about timing?" "The letters will arrive Monday. You'll start getting responses by Wednesday. Some clients might want to meet with you first, but based on what you've told me, most of them will confirm immediately." He handed me another document. "This is the notification to your former employer. It states that you've resigned, you're now operating independently, and you're requesting final processing of any outstanding benefits or compensation." I read through it. The language was formal but straightforward. No accusations, no drama, just facts. "Send it," I said. Briggs nodded. "Done. Anything else?" "The company has a leadership review meeting scheduled for Monday morning. All hands. I received a calendar invitation before I resigned." "Are you planning to attend?" "I'm not invited anymore, but I think it would be useful to have representation there." Briggs smiled slightly. "You want me to crash their meeting?" "I want you to deliver the client notifications in person. Make sure they understand the legal situation before they try to do anything reactive." "That's going to cause a scene." "I know." He leaned back in his chair, considering. "All right, I'll need details. Time, location, who's going to be there." I gave him everything. The meeting was scheduled for 9 in the main conference hall. Executive leadership would be present, department heads, the HR, and almost certainly Maris, who'd been angling for visibility in these meetings since she joined. "I'll be there," Briggs said, "with a very large folder." I left his office and spent the rest of the day making final preparations. I called each client personally, letting them know to expect formal documentation in the mail. I updated my personal website, which I'd barely touched in years, with information about the new consulting business. I organized my home office so it looked professional enough for video calls. Friday morning, I drove past the office building. I didn't stop, just slowed down as I passed, looking at the parking lot, the familiar entrance, the windows where I'd spent 27 years. It felt distant now, like looking at a photograph of somewhere I used to live. I went home and worked through the weekend. By Sunday night, everything was in place, the business was registered, the notifications were ready, the clients were prepared. All that was left was to wait. Orion called again on Sunday evening. This time I answered. "Dad." His voice was strained. "Finally. I've been trying to reach you all week." "I've been busy." "Doing what?" "Maris says you've been contacting her clients, trying to poach them." "They're not her clients, Orion. They're the company's clients, and I've been informing them about my new business, which I have every legal right to do." "You're starting a competing business?" "I'm starting an independent consultancy. Whether it competes with your company depends on what the clients decide." He was quiet for a moment. I could hear Maris in the background saying something I couldn't make out. "This is really messed up, Dad," Orion said finally. "You're making things difficult for everyone." "I'm running a business, just like you taught me, just like the company taught you." "That's not the same thing, and you know it. You're doing this to get back at Maris." "I'm doing this because I signed a resignation letter and moved on. What happens next isn't about revenge, it's about relationships and contracts. She's been working really hard on those accounts. She's prepared presentations and new strategies. If you take them, she's going to look incompetent." "Then maybe she should have treated them with more respect." Another pause. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't want you to say anything, Orion. I want you to think about why this happened, about who made what choices and why." I kept my voice level. "But more than that, I want you to think about what loyalty actually means." "You're talking about her, aren't you? About us." "I'm talking about the fact that my own son agreed to suspend me without asking a single question, that he listened to his wife's version of events and didn't bother to hear mine." "You didn't offer a version," Orion said. "You just accepted it." "Because there was no point arguing. She'd already decided, and you'd already chosen her side." The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing. "I didn't choose a side," he said finally. "I was trying to do what was right for the company." "Then you'll understand when the company deals with the consequences." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, from anticipation, the kind of energy that comes before something definitive happens. A threshold crossed, a door closed. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, imagining what was happening across town. Leadership filing into the conference hall, Maris taking her seat, probably near the front, Ellen Ward standing off to the side with her HR files. Orion somewhere in the middle, checking his phone, wondering if I'd tried to call again. And then, right around 9:15, Rowan Briggs walking in with a thick folder under his arm. I smiled into my coffee. My phone rang at 9:43. It was Victor. "Marlowe," he said. "I just got out of the strangest meeting." "Tell me." "Your lawyer showed up. Very polite, very professional. Handed out a bunch of documents to the leadership team and explained that several clients had formally requested continued representation through your new consultancy." Victor laughed. The look on that Maris woman's face was something else. "What did they say?" "Not much. Leadership went into emergency session. We were all asked to leave, but I got what I needed. I'm signing the consent form this afternoon and sending it over. You're officially my account manager again." "Thank you, Victor." "Thank you. This is going to be a much better arrangement for everyone." He paused. "Except maybe for your former employer." We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. 2 more clients called within the hour. Same story. They'd received the notifications, attended the meeting, and were ready to formalize their preference. By noon, I had written confirmations from 4 clients. By end of business, it was 6. More than half the company's major accounts. Gone in a single morning. I sat in my home office looking at the emails, the signed consent forms, the polite but firm language stating that these clients preferred independent representation through Traskir Consulting LLC. It was methodical, legal, completely airtight. Maris had spent 8 months positioning herself as the future of the company's client management strategy. She'd pushed me out to make room for her vision, and now that vision was evaporating because she'd never bothered to check the contracts. Never bothered to ask why clients stayed loyal to one person for 10, 15, 20 years. She'd treated relationships like transactions. And transactions, it turned out, had terms. My phone buzzed one more time, a text from Ellen Ward. "Congratulations on the new business. Well played." I smiled and set the phone down. Monday evening, I received an email from the company's legal department. Subject line: Urgent contract dispute. The message was formal, accusing me of improper solicitation and demanding immediate cessation of client contact. It threatened legal action if I didn't comply within 24 hours. I forwarded it to Briggs without comment. He called me 10 minutes later. "This is expected. They're panicking. Ignore it." What if they follow through? They won't. They'd have to prove you violated a non-compete or breached confidentiality. You didn't sign a non-compete, and you haven't shared any proprietary information. The clients chose to follow you based on existing relationships and contractual rights. There's nothing illegal about that. So I just wait. You wait, and you let me handle any further communication from their lawyers. Tuesday morning, the company sent another email. This one was from Orion, not legal. The subject line just said, "Dad." I opened it. "I know you're angry. I know you think we treated you unfairly. Maybe we did. But this isn't the way to handle it. You're destroying Maris's career. You're making the company look incompetent. You're making me look incompetent. Please, can we just talk? Can we find a compromise? Orion." I read it twice. Then I closed it and didn't reply. There was no compromise. Not because I was being stubborn, but because the situation wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about outcomes. Maris had made a calculation. Push Marlowe out, take his accounts, advance her career. The calculation was wrong. Now she was dealing with the consequences. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from the company's CEO, a man named Dalton Reed, who I'd met exactly 3 times in 27 years. He had a smooth voice, the kind that was used to getting its way. "Marlowe, I hope you're doing well." "I am, thank you." "I wanted to reach out personally. We've received some concerning notifications from several of our clients. They're requesting to work exclusively with your new consultancy." "That's correct." "I'm sure you understand how this looks from our perspective. It appears as though you're actively undermining the company that employed you for nearly 3 decades. I'm operating within my legal rights and within the terms of the client contracts. If the clients prefer independent representation, that's their choice. But surely you can see how this reflects poorly on all of us. These are long-standing relationships. Relationships the company invested in." "Relationships I built," I corrected. "Over 15, 20 years in some cases. The company facilitated those relationships, but it didn't create them." Dalton was quiet for a moment. "What would it take to resolve this amicably?" "There's nothing to resolve. The clients have made their preferences clear. I'm honoring those preferences. We could offer you a consulting arrangement, keep you affiliated with the company, better compensation, more flexibility. I already have a consulting arrangement, and it doesn't require me to report to anyone who doesn't respect me." Another pause. "This is about Maris, isn't it? This is about the way I was treated, the suspension, the disrespect, the assumption that I'd just accept it and fade away quietly. Maris was part of that. So was Orion. So was the entire structure that allowed it to happen." "I wasn't aware of the specifics," Dalton said. "If I had been..." "You would have done what? Overridden your operations manager and performance coordinator? Questioned their judgment in front of the staff? No, you would have let it play out because it was easier than getting involved." He didn't argue. "What do you want, Marlowe?" "I don't want anything. I already have what I need. The clients, the contracts, the autonomy to do my job without interference. That's all I ever wanted." "And the company?" "The company will be fine. It still has plenty of accounts. It still has talented people. It just won't have me or the clients who chose to follow me." Dalton tried a few more angles, appealing to loyalty, suggesting that I was being short-sighted, hinting that this could damage my reputation. I listened politely and then ended the call. Thursday morning, I received written confirmations from 2 more clients, 8 total now, nearly 70% of the company's major accounts. Friday, I met with Victor again. We signed formal agreements outlining the terms of our consulting relationship: fees, deliverables, quarterly reviews. It felt good to negotiate as equals, without layers of corporate bureaucracy in the way. "You know," Victor said as we finished, "I've been doing this a long time. Seen a lot of people get pushed out of companies. Most of them spend years being bitter about it. You're not bitter." "I'm not? No, you're methodical. There's a difference." "Maybe I'm just better at hiding it." Victor smiled. "Maybe, But I don't think so. I think you saw this coming and prepared for it. That's not bitterness, that's strategy. He was right, though I hadn't fully admitted it to myself until now. The moment Maris had started questioning my methods, assigning me trivial tasks, positioning herself as my replacement, I'd known where it was heading. I hadn't planned the resignation, but I'd prepared for the possibility. The contract clauses, the client relationships, the documentation. All of it was insurance against exactly this situation. The following Monday, Briggs called with an update. The company's lawyers contacted me. They're backing off. No lawsuit, no further threats. They're accepting the client transitions and requesting formal documentation of the changeover process. Just like that? Just like that. They don't have a legal leg to stand on, and they know it. Pursuing action would just make them look worse. They're cutting their losses. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat at my desk, looking at the stack of signed agreements. 8 clients, more revenue than I'd ever controlled as an employee, complete autonomy over how I worked and who I worked with. Maris had wanted to build her career on my accounts. Instead, she'd handed me the motivation to take them all. Tuesday morning, I received a calendar invitation. Subject, Leadership Review, all hands, Wednesday, 9 a.m. The sender was Executive Administration. I deleted it immediately. I wasn't part of that company anymore. But Briggs called an hour later. I got copied on the meeting invitation, he said. I think you should let me attend. Why? Because they're going to discuss the client situation. Maris is going to try to salvage this by claiming you acted improperly or that the clients were coerced. I want to be there to correct the record. You think that's necessary? I think it's strategic. Right now, they're scrambling internally. If I show up with documentation proving everything was legal and above board, it ends any remaining questions. They move on. You move on. All right, I said. Go. Wednesday morning, I stayed home. I made coffee and worked through emails at my kitchen table. Around 9:15, my phone started buzzing. Text from Victor. Your lawyer just walked in. This should be interesting. Then nothing for nearly an hour. Finally, at 10:07, Briggs called. It's done, he said. What happened? I arrived right after the meeting started. Maris was in the middle of presenting her updated account management strategy. Very confident, very polished. She had charts showing projected growth and efficiency improvements. And I walked in, introduced myself, and handed out copies of the client consent requirements to everyone at the table, leadership, HR, department heads. Then I explained that 8 major clients had formally requested continued representation through your consultancy, as was their contractual right. I could picture it. The room going quiet. Maris's face changing. She tried to argue. Briggs continued. Said the clients had been misled, that you'd pressured them. I showed them the signed consent forms, every single one explicitly stating the client's preference for independent representation. No pressure, no coercion, just business decisions based on established relationships. How did leadership respond? Dalton Reed asked if there was any legal recourse. I said no. He asked if the transitions could be delayed. I said the contracts required immediate implementation upon client request. Then he thanked me for clarifying the situation and asked if there was anything else. Briggs paused. I said no, and I left. That's it? That's it. Maris tried to follow me out, but Reed told her to stay. I think she's in there right now explaining how she let this happen. I thanked Briggs and hung up. Then I sat there, staring at the wall. 27 years. 1 resignation letter. 8 clients, and it was over. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Victor. Maris just left the conference room. She looked about ready to snap. Whatever your lawyer did, it worked. I set the phone down and went back to work. The rest of the week passed quietly. More client confirmations, more signed agreements. By Friday, I had 9 accounts. The 10th and final one, a mid-sized logistics firm called Porter & Klein, sent their paperwork on Monday morning. 10 clients. All of them had followed me voluntarily. All of them had signed the necessary consent forms. All of them were now formally contracted with Traskier Consulting LLC. I spent the next few days organizing my schedule, setting up invoicing systems, arranging quarterly reviews. The work was familiar, but felt different now. I answered to the clients and to myself. No bureaucracy. No politics. No daughter-in-law hovering over my shoulder looking for mistakes. Orion called twice more. I didn't answer. He sent 3 emails. I archived them without reading. Ellen Ward reached out on Thursday with a final benefits statement. Unused vacation time, retirement account rollover information. She attached a personal note. You handled this with more grace than most people would have. Best of luck with the new venture, I replied with a simple thank you. Friday afternoon, I was reviewing a contract proposal when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Orion was standing there. He looked tired, older somehow. His shirt was wrinkled and his tie was loose. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room and stood there awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "Maris is being reassigned," he said. "They're moving her to internal operations. She won't be managing any external accounts." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" His voice had an edge. "Because it seems like that was the whole point." "The point was to leave a job where I wasn't respected. What happened after that was a consequence of decisions other people made. You took everything from her. Her accounts, her credibility, her future at the company. I took my clients, the ones I'd built relationships with over decades. She assumed she could have them just because I was gone. That's not how it works." Orion shook his head. "You could have handled this differently." "How? By staying? By accepting the suspension? By letting her take over accounts she had no relationship with and hoping the clients wouldn't notice? By talking to us. By giving us a chance to fix it." "Fix what? The public humiliation? The assumption that I was too old and too set in my ways to be useful anymore? There was nothing to fix, Orion. It was already broken." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She's talking about leaving, moving to a different city, starting over. That's her choice. And me? What about me?" I looked at him. My son. 34 years old. Still looking for someone else to tell him what to do. "What about you? You're my father. Doesn't that matter?" "It did. Until you sided with her without asking questions. Until you agreed to suspend me because she said it was necessary. Until you called her accounts yours instead of the company's. I was trying to support my wife. And I was your father. You had to choose, and you chose her. That's fine. That's your right. But you don't get to be upset when I chose myself." Orion's jaw tightened. "So that's it? We're done?" "We're not done. You're still my son. But I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. I'm not going to act like everything's fine just because it's uncomfortable for you." He turned and walked toward the door. Stopped with his hand on the knob. "She really is sorry, you know. She didn't realize it would go this far. She realized exactly what she was doing. She just didn't expect me to have options." Orion left without another word. I watched through the window as he got in his car and drove away. The next few weeks settled into a routine. Client calls, project reviews, strategy sessions. The work was the same, but the context was different. I was building something now instead of maintaining someone else's structure. Victor referred me to 2 new clients. Both of them signed on immediately. My revenue was now higher than it had been as an employee, and I was working fewer hours. I didn't hear from Orion again, didn't hear from Maris. The company sent a final settlement check and a release form. I signed it and sent it back. One afternoon in late November, I was working in my home office when I got an email from Ellen Ward. She'd left the company, taken an HR director position with a smaller firm that valued experience over politics. She thanked me for being professional during a difficult situation and wished me well. I replied, wishing her the same. December arrived cold and clear. I met with clients, finalized contracts for the new year, made plans to hire an assistant in the spring if the workload continued growing. On a Thursday morning, I got a text from Victor. "Lunch today? I have something to discuss." We met at the same cafe on 5th. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at the corner table with his newspaper. "Marlowe." He waved me over. "Thanks for coming." "Of course. What's going on?" "I've been talking to some colleagues. 3 of them are looking for new representation. Their current firm is going through some restructuring, and they're not happy with the direction." "Are they looking for independent consultants?" "They're looking for someone reliable. I mentioned you. They're interested in meeting." I sat back. "That's a significant referral, Victor. You've earned it, and frankly, I think you're building something worth being part of." He slid a piece of paper across the table. 3 names, 3 companies. Contact information for each. "Think about it. If you're interested, I can make introductions." I looked at the names. All of them were established firms with solid reputations, the kind of clients that would require serious attention but would also provide stable, long-term revenue. "I'm interested," I said. Victor smiled. "Good. I'll set it up." We talked for another hour about logistics and timing. By the time I left, I had meetings scheduled for the following week. That evening, I sat in my home office and looked at the business plan I drafted 2 months ago. I'd estimated I'd need 2 years to build a sustainable client base. At the current rate, I'd hit that target in 6 months. Maris had tried to take my accounts to advance her career. Instead, she'd given me the push I'd needed to build something better. The meeting with Victor's referrals went well. All 3 companies agreed to initial consultations. 2 of them signed contracts by the end of January. My client roster now included 15 accounts, more than I'd ever managed as an employee. I hired an assistant in February, a recent graduate named Amy who was organized, detail-oriented, and eager to learn the business. She handled scheduling and documentation while I focused on client relationships and strategy. By March, I needed to rent office space. Working from home was fine for one person, but with an assistant and growing client demands, I needed something more professional. I found a small suite in a business park near downtown. 2 offices, a conference room, and a reception area. Nothing fancy, but clean and functional. The company I'd left continued operating. I heard through industry contacts that they'd restructured their client management division, brought in new leadership. Maris and Orion were still there, though Maris was no longer in a client-facing role. I didn't pay much attention. My focus was on the business I was building, not the one I'd left behind. One afternoon in April, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Marlowe Trasker. Mr. Trasker, this is James Brennan from Brennan Logistics. We worked together a few years ago. Of course. How can I help you? I'm calling because we're expanding into new markets and need someone to manage our account relationships in the region. I heard through Victor Hale that you're operating independently now. I wanted to see if you'd be interested in discussing a partnership. A partnership, not just account management, an actual business relationship. I'd be very interested, I said. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. When I arrived at Brennan's office, I was greeted by not just James, but his CFO and operations director. They'd prepared a presentation outlining their expansion plans and where they saw opportunities for collaboration. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, we'd agreed to a trial partnership starting in May. If it went well, they'd formalize it with a long-term contract. I drove home that day feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not just satisfaction, not just success, but genuine excitement about the future. That evening, my phone rang. It was Orion. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered. Dad. His voice was quiet. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. What do you need, Orion? I don't need anything. I wanted to say you were right. About everything. Maris and I are getting separated. She's moving back east, and I'm realizing how much I messed up. I didn't say anything. I should have stood up for you, he continued. I should have questioned what was happening instead of just going along with it. I was scared of disappointing her, and I ended up disappointing you instead. Yes, I said. You did. Is there any way we can fix this? I thought about it, about the suspension, the humiliation, the months of disrespect that had led to that moment in the conference room. And then I thought about the business I'd built, the clients who'd followed me, the opportunities that had opened up because I'd refused to accept being pushed aside. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe, but it's going to take time. I understand. He paused. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've done. Building your own business, making it work. You always were better at this than the rest of us. Thank you. Can I call you again? Next month, maybe? You can call, I said. I can't promise anything beyond that. That's fair. We hung up. I set the phone down and looked around my home office. Files organized neatly on shelves, client contracts in labeled folders, a calendar full of meetings and opportunities. Maris had wanted to push me out to make room for herself. She'd succeeded in pushing me out, but the room she'd made wasn't for her. It was for me, building something she'd never be part of. The doorbell rang early Wednesday morning. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 7:30. When I opened the door, a courier stood there with a large envelope. Marlowe Trasker? That's me. Sign here, please. I signed and took the envelope. Inside was a letter on company letterhead and a separate document with multiple pages. The letter was from Dalton Reed. Dear Mr. Trasker, after careful review of recent events and client feedback, the executive team has concluded that several operational decisions made earlier this year were not in the company's best interests. We recognize that the circumstances surrounding your departure were handled inappropriately. We would like to extend an offer for you to return as Senior Director of Client Relations, reporting directly to executive leadership. This position would include full autonomy over your accounts, competitive compensation, and a formal apology from all parties involved. Please review the attached terms and contact us at your earliest convenience. The attached document outlined salary, benefits, and reporting structure. Everything was there. Authority, resources, an admission that they'd been wrong. I read it twice. Then I walked to my home office, pulled up my client roster on the computer, and looked at the 15 names. 15 companies that had chosen to work with me. Not with a corporation, with me. I picked up my phone and called Briggs. I just received an offer from my former employer, I said. They want me back. What are you going to do? I'm going to decline. Politely. Good, Briggs said. You've built something better. I drafted a response that afternoon, thanked them for the offer, explained that I was committed to my current clients and my independent practice, wished them well in their future endeavors. I sent it without hesitation. That evening, Victor called. I heard the company tried to get you back. News travels fast. It does. What did you tell them? I told them no. Victor laughed. I thought you might. You know what's funny? They're scrambling because Maris's replacement quit last week. Can't handle the pressure. And now they're realizing that what you did for 27 years wasn't as easy as they thought. That's not my problem anymore. No, Victor agreed. It's not. But it's satisfying to watch. The next morning, I had a breakfast meeting with James Brennan to finalize our partnership agreement. We met at a restaurant downtown, and he brought his lawyer. Mine was already there. We spent 2 hours reviewing terms, making small adjustments, ensuring everyone was clear on expectations. By 10 o'clock, we'd signed the formal partnership agreement. Brennan Logistics would be my anchor client for the next 3 years, with options to extend. The revenue from this one partnership exceeded what I'd made in my best year as an employee. Congratulations, James said, shaking my hand. I think this is going to be very successful. I do too. As I was leaving the restaurant, my phone buzzed. An email from the company's HR department. Subject line, all hands meeting announcement. I almost deleted it, then curiosity made me open it. All staff are required to attend a company-wide meeting this Friday at 9:00 a.m. in the main conference hall. Executive leadership will be addressing recent organizational changes and future direction. I forwarded it to Briggs with a single question. Should I care about this? He replied 5 minutes later. Only if you want to watch them try to explain how they lost their best account manager and 10 major clients in 2 months. Otherwise, no. I deleted the email and went back to work. Friday morning came. I had a client call scheduled for 9:30, so I was at my desk in the small office I'd rented, reviewing notes and preparing for the discussion. Amy was in the reception area, organizing files. At 9:15, Victor texted me. You should see this place right now. Everyone's nervous. Maris looks like she hasn't slept in days. I didn't respond. Whatever was happening at that company wasn't my concern anymore. My client call went well. We discussed expansion plans and timelines. Agreed to a follow-up meeting next month. Professional, straightforward, no politics. Around 11, Briggs called. I'm at the company meeting, he said. Why? Because I wanted to deliver something in person. Deliver what? The final documentation. Client transition records, legal confirmations. Everything that proves your departure was handled correctly and that the clients made their own choices. He paused. Maris just tried to argue that you manipulated the situation. I'm about to shut that down permanently. I could hear background noise, voices, movement. Hold on, Briggs said. The line went quiet for a moment. Then I heard him speaking, his voice professional and clear even through the phone. For the record, Mr. Trasker did not manipulate anyone. Every client was informed of their contractual rights. Every client was given the option to stay with this company or follow Mr. Trasker's independent practice. Every client chose independently, based on established relationships and past performance. Someone else spoke, but I couldn't make out the words. Yes, Briggs continued. I have documentation. 8 clients initially, now 10. All of them signed consent forms clearly stating their preference. All of them were contacted by company representatives who attempted to persuade them to stay. All of them declined. Another voice, this one louder. Still unclear. No, Ms. Trasker, this is not a legal gray area. This is explicit contract language that your company agreed to years ago. Mr. Marlowe Trasker negotiated these clauses specifically to protect client relationships during transitions. The fact that you didn't review the contracts before attempting to take over his accounts is not his responsibility. Silence. The transitions are complete, Briggs said. The clients have made their choices. This meeting is simply to formalize what has already happened and to ensure there are no further questions about the legality of the process. More background noise. Then Briggs's voice again, quieter now, speaking directly into the phone. It's done. Maris just left the room. Orion looks devastated. Leadership is reviewing the documents now. Thank you, I said. One more thing. Dalton Reed just asked if you'd reconsider their offer. I told him you'd already declined and that you were fully committed to your independent practice. What did he say? He said it was their loss. I smiled. It was. Briggs and I talked for a few more minutes about administrative details, then hung up. I sat there for a moment, looking around my small office. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't prestigious, but it was mine. Amy knocked on the door frame. Mr. Traskier, your next meeting is in 15 minutes. Thank you, Amy. I gathered my notes and headed to the conference room. Another client, another opportunity, another day of work that I controlled completely. Across town, in the main conference hall of the company I'd left, Maris was probably sitting in her chair, staring at the folder of documents Briggs had delivered, finally understanding that her plan to build a career on my accounts had collapsed completely. Orion was probably next to her, realizing too late that loyalty was supposed to flow both ways, and leadership was probably calculating how much revenue they'd lost and how long it would take to recover. But none of that was my problem anymore. I walked into the conference room where my client was waiting. We shook hands. I sat down, and I got back to work.